Welcome, everyone. Today we're jumping right into a really fascinating documentary-style journey unpacking one of the most remarkable and sudden life pivots in Indonesian religious history. In this explainer, we're looking at the life of Reverend Dr. K.A.M. Jusuf Roni. We're going to map out exactly how a figure who is actually known for his intense opposition to a faith somehow became one of its most prominent leaders. So let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because you really have to notice the extreme paradox here. On one side, a former church burner, and on the other, a prominent follower of Christ and a massively influential Pentecostal leader. I mean, how does someone even cross a chasm like that? Our source material today details a man who started on one absolute extreme end of the ideological spectrum, actively opposing Christianity, only to experience a complete 180-degree shift, a shift that literally placed him at the very center of the Indonesian Pentecostal and charismatic movements. It is an absolutely striking historical turnaround.
Section 1. Early Life and Transformation.
Looking at this high-level timeline gives us a really helpful roadmap of his historical footprint, just to orient ourselves. He was born in 1946 in Palembang. Then we hit the totally turbulent 1970s, which marked his profound conversion and, right after that, his imprisonment. By the 1980s, he's out and founding a major church network, GKRI Diaspora. And finally, we see his passing in 2025 at the age of 79. Having this grand scale in mind really helps as we unpack the specific events that completely defined his legacy. So, starting at the very beginning, Kemah Abu Bakar Masyhur Jusuf Roni was born on December 6, 1946, into a highly respected and deeply religious family in Palembang. The sources really emphasize that he received strong religious instruction right from his youth, and this is actually a crucial detail. It tells us that his intense convictions and his natural leadership abilities, they were present very early on. You know, he wasn't a blank slate. He was a highly dedicated young man long before his radical shift in faith ever took place.
Moving right along to Section 2. Trials and Imprisonment. In the early 1970s, right during his early adulthood, he underwent this total spiritual transformation. And I want to be clear, this wasn't just a minor change of mind or a slight tweak in perspective. It shifted the entire direction of his life totally toward Christianity. What you should really take away from this is that this profound, deeply personal testimony of finding faith became the core engine of his entire future ministry. Literally everything he did from this point forward was driven by this singular defining experience.
But, well, a shift that radical rarely happens quietly, does it? His newfound, incredibly bold public testimony quickly led to severe controversy. According to our sources, his evangelistic activities and very public statements in the 1970s resulted in him being imprisoned for several years. It's a stark reminder of the intense friction his conversion created. I mean, think about it. He went from being a respected religious figure in his original community straight to an imprisoned convert facing serious, real-world adversity.
But the crucial point here is exactly how he responded to that adversity. An opportunity for Christian witness. That is exactly how he viewed his time behind bars. He didn't see his imprisonment as a defeat. He didn't let it silence his message. Instead, it became this crucible that essentially proved his faithfulness. It totally solidified his resilience. Those who knew him noted that he remained completely steadfast, essentially using his very confinement as a platform to demonstrate his new convictions.
All right, Section 3. Expanding the Ministry.
After his release from prison, he didn't just step back. He threw himself fully into building the church. In the early 1980s, he founded Gereja Kristus Rahmani Indonesia Diaspora, or GKRI Diaspora. And this ministry didn't just survive. It absolutely thrived, experiencing incredibly rapid growth and attracting huge congregations, especially over in Jakarta. But he didn't stop there. He later took on the role of bishop and senior pastor at Gereja Kemah Abraham, fully cementing his transition from a controversial convert to a massively established church founder.
And this brilliantly illustrates what drove his incredibly energetic preaching style. It was built right on these core pillars: salvation through Jesus Christ, the absolute necessity of personal conversion, the unquestioned authority of Scripture, the active work of the Holy Spirit, relentless evangelism, and, perhaps most importantly, courage. His own life was literally a walking testament to that last point. His preaching style was famously direct and full of energy, and these pillars formed the very bedrock of his message.
He also knew that to create a movement that truly lasted, he had to look far beyond just his own pulpit. So he became an energetic author, writing books and using various media to get his testimony out there. And even more than that, he dedicated himself to mentoring younger ministers. By doing this, passing the baton, so to speak, he touched countless churches across the entire nation, effectively becoming one of the most recognized senior figures in the Indonesian Pentecostal and charismatic communities. Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 4, A Lasting Legacy.
40. Just look at that number for a second. His active ministry spans more than 4 decades. When you step back and consider the sheer turbulence of his early years, the controversy, the jail time, spending over 40 years consistently preaching, writing, and leading is just a monumental testament to his endurance and his totally unshakable dedication. Reverend Dr. Jusuf Roni passed away on June 29, 2025 in Jakarta at the age of 79. Our sources make a point to note that his passing was widely, deeply mourned by churches and Christian leaders all throughout Indonesia. And you know, the massive scale of the mourning across the nation? It perfectly reflected the monumental impact he had made over those 4 decades. He was remembered, above all else, as a passionate preacher who truly gave his entire life to his message.
Let's actually break down that legacy into 3 structured steps. First, evangelizing the nation. He crisscrossed Indonesia sharing his incredible story. Second, founding influential churches that provided a solid, structural home for thousands of believers. And third, catalyzing the widespread growth of Pentecostal and charismatic Christianity in the region. We can clearly see how his individual, deeply personal testimony scaled up to influence an entire nationwide movement. It's like a ripple effect that just kept going.
And it all anchors right back to the core philosophy of his life. The gospel must continue to be proclaimed regardless of opposition. This single, powerful idea defined his entire journey, from a young man with completely different beliefs to a controversial prisoner and finally to a highly influential pulpit. Opposition wasn't a barrier to him, it was basically a baseline expectation that he simply continuously worked right through.
Which leaves us with this final thought. When you look at a life characterized by such a 180-degree transformation and such unbreakable perseverance in the face of literal imprisonment, how does it challenge your own views on personal conviction? Whether you share his faith or you're just endlessly fascinated by the history of it all, his resilience is undeniably compelling. Thank you so much for exploring this amazing source material with me today in this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll catch you next time.